thinking of, you have to take your kid to the gym, and I usually do that, but due to the fact that for another specific reason I have something which, for that day is more important, there is a switch in a sense, something that can be committed 90% of the time, there is a 10% unknown. If this can be treated, or if you perceive that this is relevant. Because this brings me to another question, which I think, I don't know how, but I have a feeling when you were discussing that the model you are presenting, since it has to do with individuals, these individuals could be correlated in a certain way, in the sense that these are nucleus, So maybe there is a problem of joint decisions. And we have a paper where we try very different perspective, but where we try to figure out if there is a correspondence between single choices in a house location and interviewing people singularly and then interviewing them as a group. In most cases, they were good predictors. In other cases, they were not good predictors. But the way we discovered that the best predictor for the family choosing where to go to live is the woman. But this is another point I get in mind. Well, I have several, but I don't know if you want me to just go ahead and...
Let me go with that, because I touched on this one in my presentation by emphasizing the fact that in the last model we used single workers households in order to get rid of every other possible interpretation. In other cases, we have explicitly stated the type of assumption that you can make, that you have to make, in order to make your interpretation stand cleanly in the light of the results. For instance, remember that I showed some results when we divide women in Santiago, not only according to the sector where they live, is a mixture of type of environment in the city and income, because in the eastern part of the rich people live. Juan de Dios and I live in the eastern part, for instance. And also, but we live there. We actually live there. And then we make this division between mothers and
mother, no mother.
Mother, no mother, yeah. And there was a difference. So there is something in terms of the composition of the family. Now you can treat that as what we called before the socioeconomic variable. So why don't you estimate the model for different family structures? But then you have this problem on how you treat the decision making inside of the family. What we have seen in the literature, and probably you have seen as well, is that you can assume a weighted addition of utilities of the individuals. And part of the model estimation is the weight of each individual. Therefore, part of the results that you're going to get is which one is actually imposing his or her views. Yeah. Who's the boss? Who's the boss? Who's the boss? This only tells you that this is the beginning of the story. Imagine that 15 years ago, many researchers in the world were estimating time use models where the only variables were time use. So it was time use in terms of time use, not even budget constraint. When you include the budget constraint, the things become a little bit more complicated. When you include technical constraints, things become very complicated. When you include multi-individuals in the house. So, my dear Eduardo, we have worked forever.
That's both the good and the bad news.
No, it's a good news.
Because that is, for instance,
Shouldn't you use never something about the different kind of transport mode? The value of time between different kinds
in the mode choice
Didn't you
model, no.
find anything interesting on that?
We could have, but it was already very complicated. One paper that I didn't show here is a paper where we estimated the mode choice and the time use simultaneously. That was published in Transportation Science. With Chandra, Marcela was the first author. That was really, really, really complicated. And the other model that I didn't show here was this, this new formulation by Chandra, where you have discrete continuous variables, and he formulated a new utility function, and he was convinced that the budget constraint was missing, and therefore we joined efforts, and we got some results. The problem was that you have to make a choice in terms of when you estimate the model, you emphasize either time or money. He emphasized time, but he obtained the inverse of what you can call the values of time. So I suggested to do it the other way around, and the interpretation was straightforward. Non-convergence.
Wow.
Yeah, econometrics
It's a strange.
is full of tricks.
Full of beasts.
Full of lists.
Yeah. Another idea that came up to my mind while you were talking about the specific aspects is the fact that you mentioned cooking, no, for instance, and in your how much I buy or how much I produce myself. Okay, and I think one way, I don't know how complicated it can become or how relevant it could be, but an intuition I have on this is that, especially since you are considering cycles, okay, I would see in the future, maybe you have already thought about it or done it, is to insert some form of heterogeneity. Why should I do that, in my opinion, at least? Because considering cycles, this is something me and Valeria have thought about. I'll give you another example. I mean, if you have a cycle, you could have two basic interests. One is to go into the same place or do the same activity because you like more self-producing than buying. But after a while, I don't see this as a continuous thing. Because after a while, you can get sick of that thing and you just choose, because at that point you become variety seeking. Okay? And you want to experiment something. It's like with the restaurants, you know? You keep going to the same place because you like it, but after a while you say, oh, we should go elsewhere and try this. Because I see this as potentially relevant, okay, due to the fact that correctly you are considering cycles. So maybe, you know, something is important in one way up to a certain point, but then there is some sort of discontinuity and you become something else. So the values could change through the cycle.
Yep.
Okay, that's just one idea.
Let me point out that in the theoretical general model that I presented, this could happen. In the specific formulation that I presented, which uses a Cobb-Douglas, we have a problem because the marginal utility can change, but not change sign.
Okay.
Can change.
Can change the intensity.
The intensity, but not sign. And therefore, imagine
So you cannot, at certain point, be variety seeking either.
I'm thinking about labor, mostly. You can think of individuals that actually like their work, but up to a point. And so my feeling regarding this particular problem is that so far, don't use the results to predict. Use the results to make an interpretation of the present picture.
Okay.
Okay, so it's the estimate in the amount of time that people is presently assigning to work, to time.
Use it to understand why it's happening, what
is going on.
what you're seeing.
Don't use it
for extrapolation.
to predict, because particularly in those cases where you believe that there could be a change of sign, it is not being, the model is not going to be able to accept. Yeah.
Another idea which is linked to another issue that came to my mind when you were showing the comparison between the three cities, the three cases.
Yeah.
I think it was the two issues are linked. And the first was, but how do you think, how big is the mistakes we are making if we do not accept or use your framework? Because in a case, I don't remember, I think you said Karlsruhe, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
You said Baker is okay. Now from your side. I don't remember if it was Karlsruhe.
It was Karlsruhe.
Karlsruhe.
I mean, we could make an interpretation because the value
Is equal to the
majors
wage.
is equal to the wage rate.
Okay. So basically.
And the marginal variation of work was nearly zero.
Exactly, no? So basically, the thing is, we could interpret your view as an extension of the Becker model. I'm trying to say in my words what I've seen, no?
No, because in the other two cities, you got different results.
Exactly, no, you see as
So the
it's
advantage of making an interpretation of our results from the perspective of the original model by the SERPA is that Baker is a particular case.
Okay.
But cannot be the other way around.
Exactly. One is an extension where Baker is a specific case. But it would also, in this case, I think, be very interesting, which would be, in my opinion, useful for two different motivations, to extend the number of cases you have performed, so that maybe after an extension we could figure out if there are recurrences, and do at that point be able to extrapolate where we could use one, where we could use, for instance, small cities, big cities, this type of income distribution, that type. So it could be, that in my opinion could be useful for this, because this is linked to the principle is in statistics is parsimony.
Yes.
What you're doing is more powerful, more capable of explaining, but also more data demanding. So we would like to be able to apply the best model given the condition, the possible condition.
Let me comment on that very quickly. We have applied this framework for other purposes in British and Dutch cities. British and Dutch, yeah, correct. Because we had data on time use. But that time use data was not collected including expenses and income. So what we did in those cases was to acquire another source to make a match between one and the other, which is reasonable, but it's not what you would like to have. Okay? So we have other results that we can put together and see if we can get something.
So some
It's
recurrence.
not only Karlsruhe, it's not only the southern corridor of Santiago, it's the whole of Santiago and portions of Santiago, and it's also Turgau, and it's also two surveys in British cities and Dutch cities, and what else? Yeah, that's about it.
I think just having a paper that puts all these cases together and try to discuss to see what's happening, I think it would be
Do meta-analysis.
sort of.
Yeah.
I think that would be
Could be.
could be